Joining us right now via telephone is Dr. Mary Grabar. She's got a couple of books that I think are very fascinating and well worth the read. One is Debunking the 1619 Project, Exposing the Plan to Divide America. The other is Debunking Howard Zin, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America. Good morning to you, Dr. Grabar.
Good morning.
Praise be to God. We're glad for your time today. I'd like to start with the Howard Zin book, if that's okay. I'd like you to tell me, who is Howard Zin and how come he had such an impact on America and the world around us, and why should we care about what he has done?
Yeah, Howard Zin. Well, just last week there was a celebration of his 100th birthday. He died in 2010, but Howard Zin became a communist in his teen years and was officially a member of the Communist Party USA during his early and mid-20s, and left the party probably on the instructions of the party bosses to go and infiltrate American institutions, primarily colleges, where he taught as a history professor and wildly distorted history to the Marxist narrative. And then in 1980 wrote a wildly popular book called A People's History of the United States, which has broken all sales records for a book of its type. It's being used in classrooms. The Zin Education Project, started by one of his students, makes lessons from the books and its spin-off books. And it is still one of the top sellers in the history book category. But as I wrote in Debunking Howard Zin, this is all based on a history that is distorted, that is plagiarized. He misrepresents what people say in his sources. He leaves out critical words. And so this is a history that is full of lies.
And how prevalent is his work, his influence in education in classrooms today?
Well, it's sort of become, after 42 years, it's sort of become the accepted historical narrative. We're coming up on Columbus Day, and although he did not invent this, myth that Columbus came and exploited the natives for gold and chopped off hands, he popularized it. And he took a great pleasure in having done that because it's part of his Marxist objective. And so, more and more municipalities, states have done away with Columbus Day, who was a great hero and a man of faith, and are replacing that day with Indigenous Peoples Day. So that's a lasting legacy of Howard Zin. And I might add that the Zin Education Project has had this campaign called Abolish Columbus Day. And there are pre-made lessons with sample letters for teachers to use in classrooms to lobby legislators to do away with Columbus Day.
Dr. Grabar, I have a question about his ability to infiltrate a university. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, who was behind putting him into a place of learning like that. Was there an undercurrent of other socialist or communist thinkers who were already planning to take over these institutions at the time?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So when Howard Zin started teaching at Spelman College, which was a small Christian school for black women in Atlanta in 1956, there was a concerted effort by the Communist Party to have its members drop their official membership and go into institutions in education. And so there were a number of party members who were infiltrating these colleges and other schools. And that's what Howard Zin did. And then, of course, we had the 1960s, and he rode the wave of, civil rights protest and anti-Vietnam War protest. So here he was, kind of an old-time Communist Party member who adapted to the zeitgeist of the time of, protest, changing scholarship to make it activist. And so he used that and infused, already left-leaning, sort of precepts into what was being taught. So what he does, what he did in his lessons and what he does in his book is insert these Marxist ideas and principles in, and they seem more like, just sort of common left-wing fodder, make, love, not war, and peace, and all of that. But it's really communist propaganda that he used in the classroom and that he put into his A People's History of the United States. And I exposed that in Debunking Howard Zin.
It seems like our country, the world around us, was just hungry to eat this stuff up. Why are they so anxious to embrace this Marxist ideology?
Well, I think there's, there are a lot of naive people out there who want to do good. And in the late 50s and 1960s, we saw that people were concerned about, civil rights issues and wanted to join in ending discrimination, which is a noble goal, in my opinion. But they were ignorant of the forces that were leading that protest, among them Howard Zin. And, rather than simply correcting a flaw, reforming the country, they became involved in an effort for revolution. And Howard Zin explicitly rejects reform. He wants revolution. And so, it kind of built up as a momentum. We had the Frankfurt School infiltrating in the 1930s, and it's been an evolutionary process, and I was in academia for 20 years, and I saw, how the hiring committees worked. They hired people of their own kind and, sort of let the conservatives retire or wouldn't hire them in the first place. And each generation became more left-wing and more radical.
Tell us, what is the 1619 Project?
Yeah, well, the 1619 Project simply was a special issue of the New York Times Magazine that came out on August 18th, 2019. And like a lot of the other commemorations that were published in various magazines and newspapers, it was intended to commemorate the arrival of the first 20 or so Africans on the shores of Jamestown. However, it was a very ambitious project. It was intended to wipe out 1776 and replace our founding year with 1619. And the creator of that project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, advertised that on her Twitter account by having the crossed out 1776. So, rather than, having the, Declaration of Independence and our Constitution as sort of these guideposts, what was presented was this very distorted and dark history, a false history of 1619, of these enslaved Africans being exploited through the centuries to the present day. And it posits the idea that we were founded as a slave-ocracy, and I'm using their term, a slave-ocracy that is still in existence today. We still have not achieved, what it was we set out to do, to make men created equal, or to, try to live up to that ideal. But rather what we have is still a nation that subjugates and exploits people of color. And that was turned into a book that's almost 600 pages long last November. So in Debunking the 1619 Project, my book, which came out in 2021, what I do is I expose the falsehoods of the 1619 Project. And in my paperback edition, I have an appendix now, about 35 pages long, which addresses the claims that are made about the hardcover book, which was published by Penguin Random House, that it has 1,000 endnotes, that, it has, scholars who have peer-reviewed it and checked it out, and so, there's no more reason to question its historical claims, and that's completely false, as I show in the appendix.
I was just thinking about how much Howard Zin's work really did pave the way to make it possible for a 1619 Project to be rolled out, to continue to historically revise the facts in order to fit an agenda and a narrative that they want. And then how many schools are embracing this as actual curriculum that they want to teach in the schools. And just thinking about the one issue of the American Revolution, was it a fight to preserve slavery, to force England into staying in the slave trade business? That's part of the theory here. And I was just reading back on July 4th for our audience, Thomas Jefferson's own notes on his copy of his version of the Declaration of Independence, and how the Congress struck down parts of it that included his thoughts on the atrocity of the slave trade, laying at the foot of King George the crime of being involved in the slave trade. Why would we ignore these things simply because Thomas Jefferson had slaves? I mean, what gives us the right to revise the details?
Well, there is no right to do that. If you are going to be a historian, you need to be honest, and you need to, not leave out certain things. You shouldn't be, twisting around history for an agenda of social justice, and that's sort of what Howard Zin did. So before he published his, best-selling A People's History of the United States, he wrote an essay in 1967 in honor of Herbert Marcuse, who was, one of the Frankfurt School people who came here and distorted scholarship. So, that sort of, led, that was accepted. So we've got through the decades this deterioration of historical standards, this increased acceptance of distorting history in order to meet social justice goals. And over the decades, that has just grown in popularity. And in Debunking the 1619 Project, I devote quite a bit of space to addressing these charges against Thomas Jefferson, among them the fact that he was a slave owner. And I try to provide the context. I include discussion of that passage that you just mentioned that was stricken from it against his objections. And I look at his life and how, he was born into a society where slavery and servitude were the norm. Okay, so in the 18th century, to be a free person, to be on your own economically was, something novel. It was not, a thing that we take for granted today. That wasn't the thing. And Thomas Jefferson hated slavery, and he struggled throughout his life to find a way to end slavery without war, because he could see, that there was a potential civil war coming, and he thought, well, how do you do this? The world basically, had accepted slavery as an institution. How do we, as a new country, end this institution?
Doc, I have a question here. Up until this point, we've been talking about the U.S., and obviously the U.S. has always been the target of the socialist movement, of the communist movement, because the U.S. had been the crown jewel of the world. Are there any other notable examples of things that are of the similar nature that are taking place around the world that are similar to the 1619 Project outside of the U.S.?
I can't think of any. I mean, there is, in England, it has been in, throughout, the left-wing circles and in education, this anti-colonialism movement. But I don't know of any, project, that is similar against, a country's founding. As a matter of fact, I think the 1619 Project is being embraced around the world. It's part of the continuous assault on America by Marxists and communists, which has been going on since the early 20th century. And it's quite ironic, as you point out, that, we are the target. We've been the beacon of freedom and opportunity and equality, equal rights. And those who want a Marxist regime need to knock down, this beacon because they want to institute their own kind of regime.
It's interesting. When you were saying that, I was thinking about the fact that there's a lot of talk about civil war and things like that happening in the U.S., and the only thing that makes me think that it's plausible is the fact that we have nothing in common with our fellow man now. And not to mention there's like the obvious things like transgenderism, the legalizing of gay marriage, all these different things that are happening. But even more fundamentally as a nation, we don't agree even on the date of our founding of our country. What do you think about the 1619 Project in relation to that?
Yeah, well, Howard Zin would be delighted if he were still alive to know that. I mean, this goes beyond his wildest dreams. This is the program he set in motion. As I describe in Debunking Howard Zin, he attacked our founding, just said it was hypocritical, that we were founded for the benefit of the few rich men, who were around, and to keep, the workers poor and to exploit the natives and the slaves. And this strikes at the very foundation of our nation. So you have two pivotal events, the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus, and then the founding of America with the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So you've got, a 1-2 punch that just topples the whole, idea of America, foundational dates, foundational principles. And, they've been working a long time at it. And, as I noted, I mean, in the first chapter of Debunking the 1619 Project, I noted the year before, in 2019, the month before the project came out, July 4th parades and celebrations, and no one could have imagined eliminating the 4th of July.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a milepost. Now that is put under question.
Well, we are just about out of time here with Dr. Mary Grabar, and I encourage you to check out her books, which are linked up on Amazon, but you can certainly find them on her website, which is probably a better location, marygrabar.com. That's GRABAR, marygrabar.com. Thanks for being on with us. I wish we had more time, but we're right out of time now. I mean, one of the questions I wanted to follow up with is there hope for the future? I mean, they're tearing down statues, revising history, and ignoring the fact that Africans are still being enslaved by Muslims in northern Africa today, sold in the markets in Tripoli. And yet here we are pretending as though that doesn't go on. It seems absolutely ludicrous, but we just don't have time. God bless you, Dr. Mary Grabar. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for hour number 1 today. Praise be to God. Again, check out our website, marygrabar.com. Very grateful for our insightful guests today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk to a man who is facing 20 years in prison for trying to bring peace between people who are rioting and people who are trying to stop them? What happened on January 6th there? We're going to talk to a guy who was at the very epicenter of the most intense action that day tomorrow on the program. Also, coming up after this top of this hour and this break, Tito Edwards from BigPulpit.com. Join us online, grnonline.com.